Hello guys, just a quick note to say that this episode is pre-recorded, so if you're wondering why I haven't picked up on the latest piece of Arsenal news, that is why. Okay, let me hand you back to the episode. Welcome to episode 3 of the 24-25 season review. Today's episode is all about Mikel Arteta. What did he do well last year? What did he not do so well? And what does he need to improve for the 25-26 season to make sure Arsenal go and win the Premier League title? Let's get started. Good morning everyone and welcome back to another episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, your 3 times a week dose of Arsenal coverage with me, your host Mark, wherever you are in the world. I hope you are well. This is episode 3 of the 24-25 season review mini-series. 2 more episodes to go after this one. I'm enjoying these and enjoying looking back and kind of having some distance from the season and kind of assessing, some of the things we've done. It's easy when you're kind of reviewing the season to think about what's just happened and the defeat to PSG and that kind of fizzling out of the season from there. But looking back at periods, especially that kind of November, December period where we started to really get some momentum and things like that, it's nice to reflect on those as well. So I'm enjoying this the little series, and today's episode, as you've already heard, is all about Mikel Arteta. We've done 2 episodes already on all of the players who played more than 1,000 minutes for Arsenal this season and gave them a ranking A to F. In today's episode, we're going to talk about Mikel Arteta, where he excelled. So 2 moments or 2 things that he did that were excellent, I thought. 2 things that he did that were quite poor. And then 2 things that he'll definitely need to do differently next year. And I think a lot of us will probably agree on those last 2, so stick around for that. That's coming in part 2. Let's get into it then, because I don't really have too much to say. Hopefully you've already heard this is a pre-recorded podcast, so some Arsenal news has dropped and it's all very, very exciting. I apologise for not referencing it here, but we are, of course, looking back at last season in this episode. So I'm going to start with a moment that Mikel Arteta did really, really well, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for. And the first thing that I think Mikel Arteta did really, really well this season is part of his press conferences. He's received a lot of criticism for his press conferences recently, which I don't agree with, but I'm not specifically talking about some of those moments. I'm talking about the lack of excuses, the lack of talk about injuries from Mikel Arteta himself. Now look, injuries have been a huge part of our season. Saka, Havertz, Gabriel, Martinelli, Ødegaard. I mean, I think it's 4 or 5 surgeries now as well. Jurrien Timber off for surgery and has had that. So there's been a huge amount of that in the system this year. And it would have been very easy to down tools, and you only need to look across the city, or well, not even across the city, a couple of miles away, across North London to Tottenham. I remember some of those early press conferences. I remember very specifically a quote from Ange that was like, Ange Postecoglou that was like, if you can't tell what's going wrong at Tottenham, you don't know what football is, or something like that. Very, aggressive, angry towards the question, as Ange Postecoglou has become all season. Mikel Arteta took a very different approach when his team started getting cut up by injuries in the December-January period. Now, he kind of did this over a number of press conferences, so I haven't found the very specific quotes, but he spoke much more about opportunities. He spoke about this not being a time to kind of give up, and he really did make sure that the players were ready to keep going. You lose Bukayo Saka, you lose Gabriel Jesus just as he gets some form, and then Martinelli and Havertz go down all in one kind of fell swoop, really. And he obviously at times said, look, it's unfortunate, but he spoke much more about, you have to deal with these scenarios. And I really do believe that Mikel Arteta is a very precise and a very deliberate man. And I think every time he spoke about being able to deal with injuries, being able to deal with the cards that you are dealt, he really did put out to his players, actually, this is an opportunity. You might be in a scenario next year or the year after where you're you're right in the league battle and Saka goes down again. That can happen. You need to be ready to step up and play in the absence of your very, very best players. And I really enjoyed that until maybe the last 2 weeks of the season, Mikel Arteta has never really referenced injuries as a reason for why we haven't done so well. Now, granted, in the last few weeks of the season, he has gone, look, we haven't had our players, and we need to have our players available, and we need to not get red cards. That's been a crux and something that he's spoken about towards the end of this season, about bringing Arsenal back into contention for the big prizes. That's something that we need to do. And he spoke about arriving at the end of the Champions League with all of your best players available. Again, it's not really an excuse. He's saying there, like, look, we've got to be fit and healthy. I think that's fair enough. But during the season, and especially as players started to go down, he really did tend to frame things as opportunities, not things to be disheartened by, not things to be kind of put down by, but opportunities for players coming through. One specific press conference that he did, he spoke about actually, it is what it is in terms of the injury situation. I think he really did want to reflect that to his players. It is what it is. We have to get on with it. It's an opportunity for other players to do that, and he means perform. In the ideal scenario, we have to be in charge to make these decisions, but the injuries are forcing us to make it for the wrong reasons. We need to accept the reality and move forwards. I just think it was a great message, and I enjoyed that throughout the year. And I think it will be under-indexed how important that kind of attitude was for getting Arsenal second, for getting them to the Champions League semi-final. We walked into the Champions League semi-final without a number of our best players, without a recognised striker, without our best defensive centre-back. And we still, I think, acquitted ourselves fairly well. It was obviously a really tough game, and maybe it would have been different with those players. But there was never any instance of, okay, we're here and we're threadbare, and this is going to be really, really difficult. He spoke about make it happen no matter the scenarios, and I really, really liked that. The second thing that I think Mikel Arteta did really, really well, and I think we have to praise him for this, is adaptability. And I'm talking about tactical adaptability, I guess, here. Of course, we started the season and we all had tons and tons of hope. And then Martin Ødegaard went down in that first international break. From there, we really had to adapt. And we played a run of games with Kai Havertz and Leandro Trossard up front as a pair. We are very, very used to seeing Martin Ødegaard play as the 8/10 behind Kai Havertz, and the wingers be our main threat. But in that period, we went to sort of a 4-2-4 to allow Leandro Trossard and Kai Havertz both to share that kind of false nine role as they started high and dropped into the Ødegaard position, as opposed to what we had been doing with Ødegaard, where he starts a bit deeper and drives forward, and that's his preference, of course. That was really good, and it, for a period of time, it worked. It allowed us to get some decent results. Of course, we came back from that international break and went through a weird run. We beat Tottenham 1-0, had that very difficult draw with Atalanta, and then the annoying draw with Manchester City. We then went through and beat PSG. We beat Southampton, Shakhtar, and then we had the Liverpool game, of course. But then, of course, that started to fail as well. And then we lose Bukayo Saka. And when you lose Bukayo Saka, that's the route that your team plays through. Of course, we don't really have Ben White at this point. I think he's flitting in and out of the team at this moment. But Jurrien Timber's doing a lot of minutes and a decent job at this point. We lose Bukayo Saka. And we have to adapt again. Of course, Ethan Nwaneri starts going out there, but that only really happens after Gabriel Jesus goes down injured as well. So, we had a scenario where we lost our primary creator. We changed the system, went to a 4-2-4, Leandro Trossard and Kai Havertz. When we lost Bukayo Saka, it was very much, okay, how do we change again? Because our build-up is so centred around that right-hand side. Actually, can we get more down the left? And I think we started to do that. In the middle of the season, we started to see, not a resurgence from the left, but there was a general feeling of, okay, we're kind of starting to shift across. We're starting to make a change. Of course, February happens, Kai Havertz goes down, Martinelli goes down, and we are basically without a first choice forward. Mikel Merino is forced up the pitch, and that was in the Leicester game. He came on up front after, I think Leandro Trossard started that game up front, but Merino came on up front, and he did a really good job. Of course, he scored 2 goals, but again, it's another moment where it was like, okay, we have adapted again. Really, really interesting. Pardon me. Really interesting to see how he did that. And I just have to say, I really think that was a real highlight of this season. The way he was able to adapt to some of the injuries that we had and some of the problems that we had. Look, I'm not going to say that we adapted correctly in every scenario. I don't think we did. But what we definitely did do is we made some really key changes to the system and the way we played at certain points during this season due to injuries, due to problems that we were having. And we did an okay job of that. I think he deserves tons and tons of credit because, again, for a team to have to play 3 different ways, I think, throughout the year. We started out with our base plan. We then went to the 4-2-4. We then went to the left side shift, kind of tilting our focus from the right side to the left side when Saka was out, but we still had Martinelli. And then we went to the Mikel Merino solution up front, and we sort of played the season out in that way. I think that shows a coach who really does know football, know how to adapt things. And I think in game, I would prefer to see Mikel Arteta adapt a bit more. And we will probably talk about that in a bit. But I think in between games, setting up tactical plans. I mean, you only need to look at that Real Madrid game as well. Well, actually, all the Real Madrid games. Look at the Real Madrid games and think, God, we had a great plan for those 2 games, didn't we? We did a really, really good job, and we had a really good plan for the second leg of PSG as well. Maybe the in-game adaptation didn't happen fast enough, but I thought Mikel Arteta really acquitted himself well this year, making good plans. Okay, we're going to do one more, and then we will have a break, and this is going to be the start of the things he needs to do better. Look, there's going to be a swell of response to this, I would imagine. People are going to be really keen to hear this and put the finger in and put the needle in to Mikel Arteta, because people like to do that. For me, I'm taking transfers entirely out of it because that is a team decision, so it's not really an analysis of Mikel Arteta, it's an analysis of the club as a whole. One thing that is Mikel Arteta's prerogative is who plays, and I'm going to say overplaying Kai Havertz was the one that went really wrong. Some people are going to say, look, he overplayed Bukayo Saka. I'm not sure I quite agree with that. I'm just going to pull up Saka's match logs so that I talk about this quite, with accuracy, because I know people will really want this to be correct. I actually think there was a concerted effort at the start of the season to get Saka off in games quite early. There were a number of instances where Arsenal were pulling him off, so he came off in the Atalanta game at 72 minutes. He was actually substituted at half-time of the Manchester City game. Came off at 70 minutes against Bolton. I mean, you could argue he shouldn't have been starting that game anyway. He didn't start against Preston. He came off against Chelsea. Came off against Nottingham Forest. Came off against West Ham. So there were a number of games where I think Mikel Arteta made the direct decision. I mean, look, he came off against Chelsea when it was 1-1. That's an incredible thing to do for your star player. There are a number of instances where he was pulled off early to try and preserve his legs and maybe make sure that he did last more than the season allowed him to. So I don't really buy into the fact that he overplayed Bukayo Saka. But one thing I do think he did was overplayed Kai Havertz. Again, I'm going to pull up the Kai Havertz match logs to make sure that we get this right. But Kai Havertz, we all know, is a really, really strong player physically. I mean, obviously Mikel Arteta has spoken in recent weeks about him coming back and looking beefed up, but he's always been a really, really high quality player in terms of his physical attributes: fitness, strength, speed in some senses as well. Not the fastest player, but he's certainly not slow for a 6'2" bloke. But there was that period, and we all remember the Wolves game. So the Wolves game was the 25th 5th of January. That was the one where Miles Lewis-Skelly was sent off. We had to play with 10 men for a period. And even when Wolves go down to 10 men, by the way, guys, it still impacts us because you've still got to cover more ground. Even if there's less players around you and in front of you, you've still got to cover more ground. So us playing with 10 men there does make a huge difference. He played 90 minutes in that game. We won it, of course, and he dropped to the floor at the end. It was a huge effort from Kai Havertz, and he had played a lot of football in the run-up to that. You remember at the start of the month, we obviously lost to Newcastle and then lost to Manchester United in the 2 cups in the space of 5 days. He played 90 minutes against Newcastle. He played 120 against Manchester United, and then played 2 more 90-minute games against Tottenham and Aston Villa. A humongous effort. And I think this is where it started to go wrong, because you look at that run of fixtures, a cup semi-final, a game against Manchester United, Tottenham and Aston Villa. Look, you're going to want to start your best players in those games. But then he played 73 minutes against Dinamo Zagreb in the Champions League, when I'm pretty certain we already had it wrapped up. Now, look, let's be fair. I'm pretty certain Gabriel Jesus had gone down at this point. But was there no one that we could have adapted in at this point? No one that we could have tried to finagle our way in with? You know, I know the Mikel Merino solution came later, but maybe he could have gone up. Maybe Ethan Nwaneri could have played through the middle. Hell, even like get Raheem Sterling playing through the middle rather than Kai Havertz. Played 73 minutes in that game, and the very next game was the Wolves game, where he collapsed at the end of the game. He then went on to join the team in the Girona game after about 70 minutes, got 21 minutes there, played 89 minutes against Manchester City, and then 90 against Newcastle. And to be fair, look, again, Manchester City, Newcastle, I understand him playing big numbers there. The Girona game, coming off the bench there, playing against Dinamo Zagreb, and the sign at Wolves. I just have to say, I think Mikel Arteta didn't respond very well to what he was being showed. And let's look at a number of these injuries, right? The Martin Odegaard injury is a freak accident on international duty. Bukayo Saka, we've already gone through. He was taken off a number of times early in the start of the season. I think that was unfortunate. Probably the Euros played a part of it. Even the Declan Rice injury, that was a nasty... it was like a foot, wasn't it? It was a broken foot. Again, an impact injury. Gabriel Martinelli was only a month, wasn't super serious. Jesus, that was a freak ACL injury that just, he just ran and landed funny in that moment. So there's been a number of injuries that have been, frustrating, but I think we have to put them down to bad luck. I think this one, the Kai Havertz one, and it is, in my mind, the most important one, because do we go further in the Champions League? Do we get all the way if we have our striker throughout the run-in? I think we probably do at least get to the final. I think this one is the big mistake. So overplaying Kai Havertz when he didn't need to. He didn't read the signs, okay? I think, he has this mantra, and I don't disagree with him. The big players play a lot of minutes. They play a lot of games, 50 games a year. Kai Havertz is a big player. He's physically capable of doing it, but I don't think he read the signs. The 120 minutes against Manchester United, followed by 2 more 90s. Then, starting him against Dinamo Zagreb when it wasn't a massively consequential game. Look, he got a goal and an assist, but did he need to be on that pitch? Playing him for 90 minutes against Wolves and continuing to play him after he collapsed like that, it wasn't the one. So that's it. That's the first one of what did Mikel Arteta get wrong this year. We will come back after the break, do one more of what he got wrong, and then look to the future of what he needs to change for the next 2 years. 2 more things he needs to change for the 25-26 season. Sorry for interrupting everyone, but I am on a mission and I need your help. I'm trying to get Arsenal Unfiltered into the ears of as many people as possible. And the best way that you can help me do that is by going and leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts at. That really, really helps me grow the podcast and allows more people to hear the Arsenal Unfiltered coverage 3 times a week. So if you would be so kind to go and leave a review wherever you get your podcast from, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Welcome back to Arsenal Unfiltered. As you heard in the first half, today is episode 3 of the 24-25 season review mini-series. We are breaking down Mikel Arteta today, his performance. We've already done the two things where I think he really did well. That was, the accountability when the injuries went down and the lack of excuses, and adapting the long-term tactical plans as our players got injured. One thing that he needed to do better was not overplay Kai Havertz in that crucial period before Dubai. And I'll come on to the next thing that he needs to do better in a moment, and we will wrap up with what he needs to do differently next year. Okay, so the final thing that I don't think Mikel Arteta did well, and I have to say this is a little bit more of a team thing, because some people are going to say, Mark, this is Nicolas Jover's bag. Why are you criticising Arteta? But ultimately, Arteta is accountable for everything that we do on the pitch. He obviously has Nicolas Jover, Albert Steinberg, Carlos Cuesta around him to support him and help him achieve things. But ultimately, Mikel Arteta is accountable for everything that happens on the pitch, and he is accountable for how we've defended set pieces. Okay, and for everything that we've done well attacking set pieces, I think we have done an incredible job of that. We are joint third worst in terms of goal creating actions from dead ball passes. Now, these numbers vary, okay, based on which source you're going from, whether you're going from goal creating actions or goals from, whether you're going from Opta's definition, FBref's definition. There are changes and stuff like that, but ultimately the trend is the same. Arsenal are really, really high in a negative way for kind of our defensive set-piece record, as bad as Southampton, Wolves and Tottenham. And we all laughed at Tottenham earlier in the season. Well, we are up there with them. Ange Postecoglou, I remember, spoke about, look, we're working on all parts of the game. I can't believe you think we're not working on it. Whereas Arsenal, we have gone in the wrong direction. Tottenham have gone in the right direction. We started the year with a much better record. And look, people are going to say, well, you lose Gabriel, you lose Saliba for one game, you lose Kai Havertz for a long period. You're going to get worse at defending set pieces because your biggest players are not in there. But again, I think we had plenty. We had Declan Rice for huge chunks of those games. Mikel Merino was obviously playing more. Jakub Kiwior is not a small bloke. Okay, it's not like we've brought in a very, very tiny man to come and deputise for Gabriel. He's a big fella. I think we had enough there. What we didn't have was that kind of individual coaching element to maybe turn someone into that Gabriel role of being the talker, being the loud, brave fella at the back. And sometimes I think when we've defended set pieces, we've looked super passive. The goals we conceded against Bournemouth from throw-ins, etc., have been really, really poor. Throw-ins is one of the reasons why the stats kind of vary. Some models include it, some don't, as a set piece. I think Mikel Arteta should have stepped in and done more. Maybe asked Nicolas Jover to come up with a different plan at set pieces, defensive set pieces. And I don't really buy the idea that injuries are a problem for your set pieces. I get that losing your biggest players is going to be difficult, but Declan Rice is huge. We have huge players, and I think we could have come up with a different way of defending them. And ultimately, it's cost us in a lot of games over that run-in. Look at the Bournemouth game. We conceded again from a set piece against Southampton in the final game. That didn't matter in the end, but of course, it could have done. If Martin Ødegaard hadn't have dug us out of a hole. So, look, we've done a lot of that this season, a lot of conceding from set pieces, and we have to address that next year. Otherwise, all of our strength from set pieces is kind of wiped out, isn't it? Okay, for the 25-26 season, what will Mikel Arteta have to do differently? Trust the squad. He's absolutely got to trust the squad this season. There's been a real narrative for many years around Mikel Arteta that he has a trusted group of at some points, 2 seasons ago, it felt like it was about 13 players that he trusted. He has this trusted group of players that he will bring on, and some that he won't. I think Trossard is one of those players that's always been on the edge and in that group. But players fall in and out of it all the time. I think Jakub Kiwior has probably fallen into it again now, but he could have played more. I think we lost Gabriel in a running, sprinting incident. Had Jakub Kiwior had a game or two before that in the season, does Gabriel's hamstring go? You just don't know. It's if, buts and maybes, but I think he has to expand that group, and we are, by all reports, going to have a humongous summer. We already know Martin Zubimendi is on his way. We already know that Arsenal are well in for Gyökeres or Sesko, one of the two, and we know that they're looking at a left winger. So even just there, 3 big players to add to the squad, and I can't imagine they're being brought in to be cover. I think they are going to be first choice players that are being brought in. And from there, of course, we still need a backup goalie, and we still need maybe another defensive midfielder if Thomas Partey goes, an attacking midfielder. There's lots to get done. So that squad number is going to grow, and his trusted number has to grow as well. If we do a backup goalie, I think he should trust him as well. I think he has to find a game or find time to say, look, David Raya is the perfect goalkeeper for how I want to play. Absolutely. But he needs a rest every now and again. Yes, he doesn't do the sprints and the distance that the outfield players do, but mentally, I think we've seen David Raya make some silly mistakes over the last few weeks of the season. The Real Madrid pass, the pass against PSG into Declan Rice that led to the free kick. There's lots of moments where I'm just thinking David Raya he doesn't look right, he doesn't look focused, and it's been difficult for him. I'm not sure I fully buy it as an excuse because he's made some good saves, but at the same time I can see how it might be it. So, if we bring in a João Garcia or another lone player, he's got to play that keeper. So let's expand that trusted circle, Mikel. I think that's a criticism that we've had for Mikel for a number of years, and I'd like to see him step past that and move on and do a slightly better job in that sense. And finally, one last thing, I would like to see Mikel Arteta roll the dice in games more. This is something that we saw from Arsene Wenger all the time. We used to see 2-3 strikers come on the pitch. We used to see, I think it was originally a roll of the dice, but it became a fantastic plan, that kind of deep line playmaker being a Santi Cazorla or a Jack Wilshere, kind of giving a number 10 that role where actually you're not really there to defend, you're there to create from deeper. I'd like to see that a bit more. What's wrong with taking off a Thomas Partey and putting on another number 10, putting on an Ethan Nwaneri and leaving Martin Ødegaard at the base of the midfield? Now, I know some people will be saying, well, that's not his best position, but that doesn't matter. We need to throw the barrel at it sometimes. What's wrong with Kai Havertz and Leandro Trossard, or Kai Havertz and Gabriel Jesus, or hey, Kai Havertz and Benjamin Sesko up front together all at once? I like that idea. There's nothing wrong as well with going, in a game where we're not expecting the opposition to attack us as much, maybe going Zubimendi, Ødegaard, Havertz, midfield. You don't have to play Declan Rice in games where you don't necessarily feel like you're going to need his running power. Kai Havertz has tons of running power, and by the way, he gets in and scores goals as well. So, look, I think that's a roll of the dice thing that Mikel Arteta has to develop. He is a very precise, methodical man, and he's very deliberate. But one thing that you can definitely look at Arsenal's season and say, and you can look around the teams near Arsenal and say they've got this and Arsenal don't, is that chaos factor. I think Liverpool have it in an absolute abundance, and you could argue it's why they've gone and won the league this season, because they have that front line that can rotate and go on runs to receive Trent Alexander-Arnold's passes and move around and be chaotic. You can look at Newcastle, and I look at Harvey Barnes playing, I look at Anthony Gordon playing, and think that those guys have a moment of just chaos and a risk-reward factor on them. They are fantastic players, and they do a lot of that kind of second guessing, and I think Chelsea have that in Nicholas Jackson and Cole Palmer as well. We have a much more regimented style, and I do think in certain games, especially, let's think of a couple of games actually. The Everton game. We battered them. We should have won that game. Could we have rolled the dice more in that game and thrown the kitchen sink at it? I even like the centre-back up front for the last 5 minutes. Like, why not? Actually, I know Mikel Arteta will say, well, that's not the best way of scoring a goal. The crosses are a low percentage. But actually, sometimes you just need someone to hit. Sometimes you just need a body up there to compete with the big guys, or maybe even distract the big guys so that Leandro Trossard gets a bit more space. It's just chaos. That's what it is, and I think he needs to get to that point where he's willing to roll the dice more. And one thing that I've said in this run-in, why we haven't trusted Ethan Nwaneri more for 20-30 minutes at the end of games, I don't really know. He has had physical issues this year, of course, when he started especially. I mean, I remember him having to come off quite early in one of the games, maybe half time, because he was cramping. So look, that's a thing that happens. But I would have liked to see him a bit more, and I think he could come on anywhere and be dangerous. I think come on the right, the left, centre mid, up front, wherever. I don't mind, because he's got that quality to strike through a ball and finish. So I think if I was Mikel Arteta, or if I was Mikel Arteta's friend and I was on the phone to him, I would probably be saying, make sure that you roll the dice a little bit more next season. So that's that, guys. Mikel Arteta, he did really well to not succumb to excuses, kept accountable, and kept adapting throughout the season. But I think he did overplay Havertz, and I think that one injury probably he can maybe reflect on and think about doing better on that one. He hasn't really taken enough action in my mind about addressing our defensive set-piece vulnerabilities, and I think next year he will need to trust the squad and roll the dice a lot more in games if we are to go on and win it. Overall, though, and I will say this before I finish, I think Mikel Arteta has done a very, very good job this year. From a purely coaching point of view, I would say it's not his best season, because of course when it's very difficult to rival a season like we had last season where you're really driving for the title. But I actually think he will learn loads from it. He's been very, very adaptable, and actually maybe when they sit down and reflect, maybe they'll do an exercise like this, and maybe they'll pick up on some of the similar points that I've picked up on this morning and say, okay, that's an opportunity for us to do a little bit better, for us to protect ourselves a little bit more and make sure that the margins go in our favour a couple more times. Mikel Arteta, I think he's done an above average job this year. If I was to give him a rating from A to F, it would be a B. Last year was an A. I don't think he could have done much more last year. We did a really, really good job and just got pipped by Manchester City, being absolutely exceptional. This season, I think there was things he could have done better, moments that he could have done differently, but actually given so many of the scenarios that he had thrown at him, I think he's done a solid job to get us where we are and get us up to that Champions League semi-final. And hopefully next season hopefully he listens to Arsenal Unfiltered, and next season he can take on some of the lessons. Okay, guys, the next episode of the 24-25 season review will be the awards episode. So we'll do player of the season, goal of the season, match of the season, all that sort of stuff. And I really look forward to doing that one, because it's looking back at all the positives of the season. So yeah, that's a fun one to do. Like I said in the middle, guys, I'm on a mission to get Arsenal Unfiltered into the ears of as many people as possible. So wherever you listen to your podcast, if you could go and leave a review, that would be really, really appreciated. And we're in the summer now. Hopefully, I said before, this is pre-recorded, so hopefully Arsenal have signed lots and lots of players already. Hopefully Gyökeres or Sesko is in. Hopefully we are close with Rodrigo, maybe. Who knows? I don't know what names will be circling around by the time this comes out. But hopefully we have lots and lots of exciting new players. And when I am available to record live again, we will be talking about those new signings. But for now, guys, all that's left to say is thank you for following, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you very, very soon.